of it for us. We started this series in the book of Jonah a couple weeks ago. We're now in the third week of that, and then we'll do one more next week as well. I know that the Bible study just wrapped up this morning, and I wasn't able to be there for every week, but I've heard that it went well, and so thank you to Alex and Logan for leading that time, and also those who participated. But I'm going to read from Jonah chapter 2, Jonah chapter 1, starting at verse 17 into chapter 2. And this is the part about the fish. I said Jonah wasn't really about the fish, but this is the part about the big fish. And so we're going to talk about that. He had just been thrown into the water by the sailors in chapter 1, and he was sinking down to the bottom. So we'll start there. Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, "In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You hurled me into the depths, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled around me, and your waves and breakers swept over me. I said, I've been banished from your sight, yet I will look again toward your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me, the deep surrounded me, seaweed was wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down, the earth beneath barred me in forever. But you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them, but I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed I will make good. I will say salvation comes from the Lord. And the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land." I want to ask y'all a question this morning as we begin. Has anyone ever hit rock bottom? Anyone brave enough to admit it? Rick said yes, I heard that. Have you ever hit rock bottom? Have you ever sunk down so low that you felt you couldn't go any lower? Maybe you got in over your head financially, and you wondered how you would ever get out, wondered how you might even survive. Maybe you experienced a tragedy in your life that robbed you of your innocence, leading you down a dark and lonely path of grief and fear. Maybe a tragedy in your life led you to question God's goodness, or even question God's existence, forcing you into an existential crisis, feeling completely untethered from anything that could keep you grounded and secure. Maybe you've experienced the dark hole of addiction. Maybe someone has harmed you, causing you to suffer in ways that you did not intend and you did not deserve. Maybe you made an unhealthy choice, and another unhealthy choice, and more unhealthy choices, and it took you to a place that you never wanted to go. Rock bottom. It's not a place any of us ever intend to be, but sometimes we find ourselves there, don't we? The book of Jonah, this story that we're talking about today, the very beginning of Jonah begins with God calling Jonah to arise. To arise. God called Jonah to arise, to get up and go to Nineveh and become part of God's plan for justice and mercy. However, instead of rising to God's call, instead of going up to the place Jonah was called to go, Jonah began a very long descent. He went down and down and down and down. You know, scholars have pointed out as they've read Jonah very closely and read it in the original language that the book of Jonah has many words that are repeated. And one of those words that's repeated a lot is the word down. God called Jonah to arise, but instead Jonah went down and down and down. First, instead of going up to Nineveh, he went down to Joppa. When he made it to the shipyard, he went down to board the boat, and then he went down to the lowest part of the ship. He then lied down to go to sleep. The sailors who threw him overboard, they threw him into the water, and he went down into the sea. He then went down into the depths of Sheol, down to the deep heart of the seas. It says he went down to the roots, to the base of the mountains. He went down into the pit. God called Jonah to arise, but he ran, and he went down and down and down and down. I mean, talk about hitting rock bottom, right? Jonah knew what rock bottom was like. You know, you need to understand something about the sea, all right? To be hurled into the sea, that's one of my greatest fears, to be honest. Like, the ocean scares me, and we know a lot more about the ocean than the ancient cultures did. The ocean, the sea, to be hurled into the sea was one of the most dangerous and terrifying things that could happen to a person in the ancient world. The sea was feared. It was a place of chaos, a place where unknown creatures lived. In the ancient world, the sea, the depths of the sea, was a place of death, of annihilation. It was a place where they believed you would be separated from God. So you have physical death and spiritual death. The depths were a terrifying place to go. And you could probably hear in Jonah's song that he was singing that he was so far down, separated from God, headed towards spiritual and physical death. This is where Jonah was headed. Jonah literally went to the place where it was believed God could not be found. He was physically and spiritually dead. He had no hope. And yet, God was actually there. The place of death, the place of complete separation from God, the place most feared by all, God was there. Jonah 1:17, now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. You know, some folks have called this huge fish a severe mercy from God. It's mercy, but it's pretty severe, right? It's not what I would want to come save me. I'd prefer like a submarine or something, you know. It's not a big, scary fish. I think severe mercy is fairly appropriate. Just as the sea was terrifying to the ancient world, huge fish were also terrifying as well. And huge fish kind of scared me too, just to be honest. In the ancient world, I mean, sea monsters lurked beneath the waters. They didn't have submarines and cameras and scuba divers. They only knew of large fish when they surfaced or when they washed up on shore. The things of the deep are very scary. As Jonah is plunging to physical and spiritual death in the chaos of the sea, the thing that comes to save him is a huge sea monster that swallows him whole. I'm sure that's not what Jonah was hoping to see. Yet it was the terrifying sea monster that saved his life, a severe mercy. Sometimes we are saved in surprising ways, aren't we? Some of you who've hit rock bottom, you may know that you've been saved sometimes in ways you did not intend. As Jonah is plunged down even deeper into the belly of the sea monster, he finally wakes up. He finally is able to see what's happening. He's finally able to see a bigger picture. He's finally humbled to some degree, and he sees how far he has gone astray. You know, in recovery, they say it takes what it takes. It took Jonah hitting rock bottom. From the belly of the fish, Jonah sings, "But you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit." The descent is over, for God has lifted him up. He sent the fish to rescue Jonah. I see the fish as a sign of God's mercy, as severe as it might seem. Jonah literally went to the place where it was believed God could not be found, and yet God found him there and rescued him. Jonah did not deserve this. Jonah was not actually a very good person, yet Jonah was saved by God. We worship and serve a very scandalous God. Jonah is not the person that should have been saved, yet this is who was saved. And as we move on in the story, God gets even more scandalous in the next group of people God decides to save. I said 2 Sundays ago that Jonah can be a mirror for us. You know, we talk about how some of the stories in the Bible can be an uncomfortable mirror for us to look at, where we look at it and we're like, this story is revealing things about us that we may not want to see. Jonah was first a mirror for the people of Israel, and I believe it's also a mirror for us as we read it today. Let's think about Israel just for a moment. Remember what I said last week. Jonah was likely written down either during or after the exile. Now think about exile is the tragedy for the Israelites, for the people. Their temple was destroyed. They were kicked out of their land. This was the defining tragedy for their people. The exile was a moment where they were at their lowest point as a people. Through their own failures and also through the brutality and greed of the empires around them, they ended up sinking to the depths. They went down and down and down as a people. Their temple was destroyed. Their homes, many of their homes were stolen from them. Their fields where they would earn a living were set ablaze and burned. They believed they were even salted after they were burned so that they could not grow anything for many, many years. Their families were killed. Life felt hard and hopeless. I'm sure they were asking questions, where do we go from here? Now, if Jonah is a mirror, I imagine at this moment of exile, the Israelites would have seen themselves in the mirror through the story of Jonah. They were sinking to the depths, just like Jonah, feeling far from God, feeling abandoned, feeling discouraged, at the point of death. Jonah, as a mirror, would show them how far they had gone, how deep they had sunk. But Jonah, the story could also provide some hope for them, right? Because God found Jonah in the place of hopelessness and death and brought his life up from the pit. You know, for the Israelites, they believed God's presence really fully resided in the temple. They didn't even have a temple anymore. That's why when you read the Psalms, they're often like, where do I go to find God? Because they're longing to go back to the place where they believed God's Spirit dwelled. Yet the story of Jonah would perhaps show them that God's Spirit is actually not confined to these places where we seek to box God in. Maybe if Jonah could be lifted up and raised to new life, then just maybe the same could happen for the Israelites. Maybe God could hear them and God could rescue them. If Jonah could rise, then perhaps they could rise too. Let's bring this story to today. Think about us. We can look at this story and use Jonah as a mirror to teach us more about ourselves as individuals, because in many ways we probably as an individual see ourselves in Jonah in many ways. But we can also think as a community as well. How do we see this story teaching us and inspiring us and challenging us as a community? You know, I think about the American church. We're a part of the American church here in Lexington at Embrace. Certainly the American church should hold up the mirror of Jonah and see the ways that we have sunk down and down and down. The ways that the American church has really plunged into the depths of moral depravity and greed and lust for power. The American church has become so addicted to comfort, consumption, I mean, I believe we're on the verge of spiritual and physical death in many ways. You know, I've been thinking about this even just recently. I saw these photos of people taking their pictures next to a sign that says Alligator Alcatraz. Have you seen this? Like, these are Christians doing things like this. When Christians are celebrating and supporting terrorizing immigrant communities, making life hard for the poor, taking away health benefits for those who suffer, I believe we've sunk to some pretty deep lows. Do y'all agree with me? Jonah should humble us. But the mirror, I think, can also give us some hope. If we are willing to humble ourselves, then I believe revival and grace can come. There's this idea in the Old Testament that the prophets show us is that, you know, revival doesn't really come just because we pray and we sing for a really long time. Revival comes, that's part of it. Prayer and singing is a good part of it. But revival is promised. God showing up in big ways is promised to us when we humble ourselves and we seek mercy and we seek justice and we take care of one another and we start to sow seeds of love and goodness in our world. That's what wakes God up in many ways to what we're facing. All is not lost. I think Jonah shows us that there's no place God won't go to bring his people back to wholeness. And so we can look at the state of things here in our country and think, man, how far have we strayed? Is there any hope for us? Well, I think Jonah can help us see that there is hope for us. And my hope that here in our little pocket of this nation is that we can be part of the remnant, part of the people of God who try to remain faithful, and that we will be able to increasingly see revival and experience revival as we continue to humble ourselves and seek God's goodness and justice and love in all the ways that we can in our lives and in our communities. You know, as individuals, we can look at Jonah and we can see clearly that many of us have hit rock bottom. And some of us have been at that point all too often. Some of you all in this room right now may feel like you're already there in the pit. Or maybe you feel like you're awfully close to hitting rock bottom. Maybe you've sunk down and down and down. Maybe that's where you can find God's love and mercy and grace. It reminds me of Psalm 139. It says, "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence?" It says, "If I go up to the heavens, you are there. But even if I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast." The writer of this psalm is really hitting at the heart of what Jonah discovered in the depths of the sea. That God is in fact there, and that there's no place we can run where we escape God's presence. Even in the depths, God is there. Even at rock bottom, God is there. All is not lost. There is hope for a new day. There is hope for us. We serve a God who burns for justice, a God who is merciful and powerful and full of love. I don't claim to fully understand our God. Most of the time, I feel like I don't know much at all about God because God is big and mysterious. And clearly, Jonah didn't fully understand God. But I think like Jonah, I can look back at my life, and I imagine many of you can as well, and we can see God's heart throughout our life. We can see God's salvation. Many of us have experienced God's saving power in our lives at different points throughout our journeys. Everything is hard and confusing right now, but I'm clinging to that deep belief that God is near and that God is walking with us through it all. I subscribe to these emails that I get from this group called the Center for Action and Contemplation. Richard Rohr and some others involved with it. And I get those emails every day, and then Rob Durham occasionally sends me them twice, so I get to read them 2 times. He's not here this morning, but I get them in many ways, and they're wonderful. But it so happens this week they're focusing on the story of Jonah, in their kind of weekly series. And so every week, last week, all the reflections were on Jonah. And Richard Rohr, one of them, he wrote, and I thought it was pretty interesting what he said, but he loves this story, and I'll read it for you. He says, "I love this story so much that I've collected images of a man in the belly of the well for much of my adult life." And he says, "I think I live in that well's belly permanently, with loads of unresolved questions and painful paradoxes in my life. Yet God is always vomiting me up right in the right place, in the complete opposite direction that I've been trying to run, just like Jonah." I love what he says here, that he feels like he lives in the belly of the whale permanently. It's a place of, Jonah was probably so confused. He's just like, what on earth is going on? Like, for so many reasons. Jonah loved God, but Jonah also did not want to go do what God had called him to do for really good reasons we're going to talk about. Jonah had just been tossed into the sea, thought he was done, and then God showed up at the moment that he needed him. I think like Richard Rohr, I have a lot of unresolved questions, a lot of painful paradoxes that I see in my life where they're hard to reconcile, right? Paradox is like two things being true at once, that seem to contradict one another. And I feel like God is more and more mysterious as I get older. I don't feel like I understand God more. I feel like in many ways I understand God less as I get older, just because life happens, right? And we have a hard time reconciling a lot of things. Like Jonah, I don't want to love my enemies. Does anybody here want to love your enemies? I don't. I certainly don't. I don't want to love my enemies. I don't want to love the enemies of people that I love. Like Jonah, I am selfish. Like Jonah, I often run from God, not wanting to do the things God has called me to do. Sometimes I run because I'm scared and I don't want to do it because I'm afraid. Sometimes I run from God because I just don't want to do it. Yet, I can say that I've experienced God's mercy, and God has rescued me many times throughout my life in many different ways and shown up for me in many different ways. And I imagine that you all could say the same. And I love it that it's in the belly of the fish that Jonah writes this beautiful song. And he's doing this creative, beautiful thing while he's in the midst of such a terrifying moment. And as I kind of sit in this place of having lots of questions and noticing and seeing the painful paradoxes of life, I'm going to keep trying to sing. I'm going to keep trying to reach out to God, even in the belly of the well. And so I encourage you all to continue to do the same, to continue reaching out to God, even as life is hard, even as life is confusing, even if you're unsure if you're even going to make it. Let's continue reaching out to God, trusting that there's no path that we can go down that is too scary or too dark or too difficult for God. God follows us wherever we go. I said this a couple weeks ago on a Monday night. I used to have this image of God that like me and God are walking hand in hand. We're doing good, and I'm feeling good, and I'm close to God. And maybe I make some choices, or I get inside of myself too much, and I start wandering away from God over this way. And then God stays right there, and I just keep going over this way, and God's over there. Before you know it, I'm so far away. God's way over there. I'm way over here. And then it's hard when you're in those situations because you wonder, like, how will I ever get back to God? God's too far. I'm too far away. I can never get back to God. And that keeps people from going to church. It keeps people from reaching out to God because they feel like the journey is too long to get back, right? And I've learned over the years that I don't believe that's true anymore. I don't believe that's not a good image for me. I believe what happens is actually when we're walking with God and we choose to go our own way, like God's not just like staying put. Like I believe God actually pursues us and follows us. And if we run from God, God can run too. And I believe God can run as fast as we can and keep up with us. And I believe it's not so much that we have to like take this great massive journey to find our way back to God. Like, I think we just need to turn around and see that God's right there all along. And if you don't believe God pursues you, then think about this story of Jonah. Like, Jonah he was running as far away from God as he could go. God said, go east to Nineveh. He said, I'm going west as far as I can possibly go. I'm going down, 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 down to the place where God cannot find me. And lo and behold, God followed him all the way there. And I believe that God If God would do that for Jonah, as nasty of a man as Jonah was, God would do that for us. And I believe Jesus showed us that and showed us that with a lot of clarity in the life of Jesus and what he was willing to do for us on the cross. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.